All right, I think we are live. This is a Live with Sondra webinar sponsored by Gatemaster Technology. And today we're going to be talking about building the perfect nightmare, powering haunted attractions with the thrill of engineering. And what I'm really excited about this show today is not only the two special guests that we have who are going to be on this panel today and part of the discussion, but also we are broadcasting this live on Halloween. So happy Halloween to everybody out there who is celebrating and dressing up for the day and all of the exciting things that come with this day. I'm going out tonight trick-or-treating with the kids. So there's still a full day of fun that's going to be happening over here. Before we get started, let me just introduce our guests. I have today Brendan Walker, a former aeronautical engineer turned industrial designer who's authored the Taxonomy of Thrill and founded the Thrill Laboratory is known as the Thrill Engineer. His work has reached over 1 billion viewers on Discovery, and he designs attractions for major clients and speaks on the thrill design globally. Brendan, welcome to today's webinar and show.
Great to be here, Sondra.
Our next guest is Leonard Pickel, who has been in themed attraction design for over 40 years and has created 300 plus haunted attraction venues at organizations like Universal Studios, Six Flags, the Playboy Mansion, and he focuses on fright, psychology, and the innovative scare design, including his triangular wall grid system and the pickle theory, which has thrilled more than 1 million people, and he continues to craft his work around the world with installations in Kuwait, Australia, and the United States. I believe, I'm not sure where Leonard is today, but I know that he is traveling all over the world building these attractions. And Leonard, welcome to the show. Did we lose Leonard?
Yeah, he's been spirited away immediately.
Yeah, you know what? He's been traveling. I know. If my team that's watching, if you guys can help assist him get there, because I'm going to start with Brendan. I know, Brendan, thank you for coming back to join me for this panel discussion. We can get started with some of the questions that I have for you.
Cool.
And what I am super excited about having you back on the show, because it was such a fun conversation that we had last time. Brendan,
I'm sorry that Leonard just left us then, because I was actually just going to just give him a little bow. He's missing that because his bio is fantastic.
Save it. Yes, just save it for him. He's coming back. I know with traveling sometimes it makes it really hard to be somewhere where we have like steady internet, and I know right now, I mean, just I can't even believe that we've got both you and Leonard on the show today on Halloween, especially with both of your backgrounds. Brendan, if you don't mind, I have a question about you, or for you, about innovation and technology, while we're waiting for Brendan to return. And it was something that we didn't talk much about on the show, but I'm curious, about AI, right? And how AI is transforming. There he is.
Sorry about
Leonard, I don't know how much of the bio you missed, but welcome back to this live event. And oh, that's okay. I know you're traveling. World traveler. Well, we were just starting with the conversation around innovation and technology. And the question that I brought to Brendan is, how is AI transforming content creation in the attractions industry? And I know that it's Halloween today, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about the thrills, if it's involved, and what that looks like creating a thrilling experience for people. Brendan, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Yeah, I mean, the question of artificial intelligence is, it's clearly all over the press, and there's a great deal of excitement about what it may hold for, well, not just humanity, but for the entertainment industry. And I think it falls into two camps. There are those who are who probably are a little bit wary about over reliance on such technology because, we've got great ways of doing things already. But then at the other end, it's got great promise for two reasons. And I think one of the principal ones is probably not as sexy and as exciting, but it's to do with productivity. So, we can create tools which can are more reliable, are robust, are repeatable. So we're talking about making, let's say, digital imagery or audio, or we can create new content, let's say like news streams, which are optimized and automatically generated using artificial voices. But then you start slipping down that sort of creative slope. And one of the things we're interested in at Studio GoGo is making content for VR for rides. And so we're now really closely tracking the development of 3D content creation. And there, I think we're going to see a real uptick in productivity, not just technically, but also creatively. And content is king. And when you're developing something which is like a media player, a ride becomes a media player, you've got to feed that machine. But I still think the reliance, I mean, that the question about where the creativity comes in and whether in 10 years time we're just going to end up with a sort of, say, brown noise because nobody's putting any fresh inputs into the system that the AI is learning from. That's something we've got to wait and see. But I'm pretty optimistic about the quantity and the quality of content, at least, which is going to be being created. And already, I think within the last 2 years, there have been massive step changes in the different AI engines and the evolution there. So I'm thinking, like, I don't know if we're on an exponential curve, but something's going to have to throttle it at some point. But right now, it kind of looks like sky's the limit.
Well, I saw something scary this morning. I was just watching it was a presentation being done by Google about how the AI was asked something in a language that they didn't believe that it knew. Have you seen this?
No, no.
And it quickly learned the language, like instant,
Wow.
and was
Wow.
responding in this way. And I just thought that was so fascinating. Yeah, it's pretty. This was a Google presentation of what they're seeing with some of the AI right now. So
Yeah.
I agree with you that the sky's the limit, because I think this is something that we never even thought was possible.
Yeah, and I think the thing there as well is that people can say it's like the universal translator, things that we saw on Star Trek. I know there's that challenge about the what were they the tricorder challenge that there
Yeah.
used to be about making the medical monitoring devices that could be like the tricorder. But now, as you say, Google have sort of cracked the universal translator. You know, what next?
And it wasn't asked to do it.
That's even
That was actually
scarier.
the crazier thing. Yeah, it wasn't asked to do it. It wasn't programmed or asked to do it, which was the even more wild thing for me. Well, Leonard, I have a question for you, with regards to technologies and, what you believe are essential for designing immersive, technologies that are essential for designing immersive experiences and haunted attractions today. Is there anything that you're seeing popping up? And I know, like, just talking about AI, like, for some of us, I don't think we've even thought in our lifetimes these things would be happening. So I think there are so many people are just in awe of what's possible.
Right.
But Leonard, what are you seeing?
To me, any kind of an experience like a haunted house or like any kind of themed entertainment, I mean, you're telling people a story. So to me, it's all in the in the background, the backstory, and what are we trying? What kind of emotion are we trying to pull out of people? And so I'm using ChatGPT and some other things to do in my storyline development. And it's not there yet. It's not to where I can just put in a prompt and it spits out something that's perfect. I still have to go through and edit it pretty, through it. Actually takes several trips too. And I always ask it for suggestions. And one of the latest times that I did that, it took my main character and flipped it from a male to a female, which I would have never thought about doing. but it actually made it a much better story. So even though I had to go through and rewrite it, it didn't understand the nuances. It certainly did. It brings up some thoughts, some things. It allows you to brainstorm by yourself, really, because you're kind of pulling things from all over the web that influence the AI, and so it does expand on some stuff. It's not close yet. I mean, they're talking about how AI will eventually do away with architecture, which means it'll probably eventually do away with with themed attraction design as well, because you'll be able to plug in what you need and it'll spit out drawings, and you'll start building immediately. But for now, I mean, I don't think you'll see that in my lifetime, but it certainly has come a long way, and a lot further and a lot faster. And the growth of technology is absolutely exponential. I mean, 100 years ago, we were in the dark ages compared to where we are now. Just in my lifetime, from going from a phone that's connected to the wall by a wire, and there's only one in the entire house, and you had a really long cord so you get a private conversation. It was those kind of things to now, 12-year-olds have a phone and can answer any question that they've ever wanted to know, like why is the sky blue? All they have to do is type it in their phone. They don't need to ask Dad. He didn't know anyway. So that kind of stuff is really amazing. And where will we be in another 100 years? I just can't imagine. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it was interesting. Since I saw you last, Leonard, I was on at an event with IAPA, not Scary Farm, and it just exactly what you're saying. We got to listen to a presentation and a panel on the three creators behind the Widows haunted house that they have there. We got to walk through it. Fortunate. I mean, I think both of I don't like jump scares. So they were kind enough to have no actors in there during the while we were going through the presentation. So we went through the haunted house that with the lights, all of the lights and all of the technical was still there. We just didn't have the actors. And then we went through the presentation, and after the presentation we were able to walk back through with the lights on, which allowed us to almost have, for me, what was the most amazing part of the experience with the lights on is that I was able to see some of the I'm trying to think of the right word, like some of the design that you would miss if you were scared and running through the thing, and in the normal fashion with haunted actors. I mean, you just don't have time to stop and see all the detail that was put into this. And that kind of leads me to my next part of the conversation, which is attraction design and experience, because what I realized in walking through that attraction with the lights on was just the attention to detail that was brought into that experience that I know you are both, fans of. So Leonard, can you share your process for designing haunted attractions while ensuring it remains operationally feasible, which was really cool about what this presentation that we did with IAPA had, because there was so many parts of the operation I had never even considered before.
Right.
And in terms of design.
There's a lot of detail in actor placement and giving that actor enough room to to be able to do what he needs to do and still be able to breathe and not bump into somebody else or be close to something animatronic that's going to get him injured and that kind of stuff. So there's a whole world of backstage, behind the scenes that the public going through never sees, but is integral to the function of the attraction. I mean, you have to be able to, get to those people, get to your actors so that you can give them breaks. You have to be able to, get them something to drink. You have to make sure that, if there's if something's broken, that they need to be able to let somebody know so that they can go in and try to fix it. There's a huge underbelly of things going on in the attraction that have nothing to do with scaring anybody. That might be unusual for haunted house industry. Haunted houses are a completely different concept than almost any other form of entertainment. Almost everything else, you're kind of the audience. You're sitting in a stage, looking at a stage, or you're watching a film. You're doing something, but haunted house was was interactive long before interactive was cool, because what you do, what the actors do, what the people that are with you do going to the haunted house will completely change your experience. And there's a lot of that background behind the scenes stuff that's going on, that to keep that operated and oiled and make sure it's running at capacity to where you're not getting huge long waits in line and people being upset because they waited for hours to go through a 15-minute experience.
Yeah, you know what? I was interested. You mentioned like designing for the haunted actors, right? The placement of the haunted actors alongside the placement of the animatronics. And one of the things that I did notice was that where the actors were one of the most worn down parts with the lights on. You could see this. I mean, of course, with the lights off, you couldn't see it because, there's always somebody standing there. And I didn't realize this till that event that, they're casting. They have an A, B cast. I mean, they've casted characters, and the storytelling you mentioned as well, like in the entire part of the storytelling that has to be able to be part of the building, the architecture, everything. I mean, it's quite a big thing that you're creating. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah, it's fun too. I mean, having that, everything intertwined and making sure that the actors are doing what they're supposed to do. And typically the animatronic is the misdirection for the actor to come out and scare people. It's because an animatronic can only do one thing. It can do it every time perfectly, but it can only do one thing as long as it's working. Sometimes they break and they just sit there. But an actor can do something different every time. He can choose what part of the group that he wants to impact. He can interact with the people going by. Stuff that an animatronic, at least the haunted house animation, really more than animatronic can do. So the scares really left to the actors. The animatronics become misdirection to make people think that's what it's going to scare when they come from a different direction.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Brendan, I have a question for you with regards to something similar, and that is like the approach to balancing thrill and safety when designing these experiences. Because I had a haunted actor on the show just earlier this week, and he says I scared somebody so bad they fell back on their rear end and crawled out of the room. And and I know that is something that's happening. I mean, I guess that's also a good indicator that you are scaring people.
Yeah, something's going right. I think fascinating. I mean, listening to Leonard, you speaking about the actors, that aspect. I know that in the UK, the traveling haunted house and ghost trains nearly died out at the end of the 90s when changes in employment laws meant that teenagers could no longer be employed on minimum wage to go and jump out on people, and that sort of the fine balance between the overheads of actors and that variability that they bring, that element of risk and novelty as well, is like kind of critical. And I think that for me, I think if you let me talk about one of the rides we make, which is a haunted swing. So Leonard, the old haunted swing effect. You go in a room, you're on a swing, and the room's on a mechanical linkage, and it'll twist in the opposite direction. Now that, as far as health and safety, as far as risk and thrills concerned, there's a perception of risk that somebody going into one of those environments will have, and there's also, because of the novelty of the experience you're delivering, there's a certain level of sort of like arousal, sort of or emotional excitement they get from that. But at some point they think their perceived risk of what might happen, let's say in the haunted swing, it's like they think they're swinging way higher than they actually are, and that's when they start panicking. That's when they think they become fearful. That's the area you want to be playing in a little bit. But in actual reality, they may only be swinging a little bit backwards and forwards. So the real risk is actually much less than the perceived risk. And that profile about where you get that sort of perceived risk, where the sort of element of fear and thrill can be developed, and the real risk, that it's as a sort of, in sort of theatrical terms, it's sort of hiding that, and owning that space, uh, making sure you're absolutely safe at the real risk limits, but also making people, drawing them into your world, whether it's the perception of ghosts and ghouls, or literally like you, but somebody jumping out on you, Sondra. It's that for me is the sweet spot to play in. And I think constantly trying to find out where that is, and every novelty, every different trick or special effect will have its own kind of profile, for, if you're trying to entertain the 95th percentile of people going through that attraction. So, and actually this brings me back sort of to the AI aspect that we mentioned earlier. I think one of the other things that AI can do for us is kind of like the machine learning. So what's we may not have the answer, and the answer may not be out in the world, but what AI might be good at is actually watching, observing, and making micro adjustments to show timing and other effects to try and optimize those kind of windows of opportunity that we have to stay safe, but still make people feel that they're in this sort of, let's say, emotionally ambiguous zone where we're playing with them. So yeah, I think for me that there's a lot in there, but that's the kind of approach I usually take.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up kind of that threshold. Because to be honest, it's not that I don't like jump scares. It's the anticipation of the jump scare I don't like. It's like the adrenaline that I get beforehand. I'm like, okay, but I know that's part of it, right? That's actually what you're going for. Is that? So yeah, I
It's
think
very
we
much
might have. Oh, go
it's
ahead.
very much the it's very much the suspension of disbelief. You're
Yeah.
trying to make people forget that they're going into, a building that somebody, put stuff in to scare you, or going into a, a temple or whatever the swing is in to make, make you think it's haunted. You're trying to get them to suspend their belief that they're going to be safe, so that you can put in something that makes them feel like they're not safe, and put in the chainsaw maniac, or the mechanism that's going to flip you upside down and dump you out of your seat. You put that kind of stuff in, so if they have, and that's what you have to do. That the job of the designer is to make sure that the sets are detailed enough, that everything is realistic enough that it could actually happen, and to make it so that you can suspend that disbelief even for a moment, so that the lizard brain, the lizard side, the non thinking side, the reaction side can take over, and make you jump, or make you scream, or make you take off running, or start swinging, which is the worst thing that can happen on a house, but it does happen. So it's really trying to get people to that point, so that you can then put them in a situation where, yeah, there's somebody trying to kill them, or there's a machine that's trying to dump them upside down, or do something. And that's really the goal of what I do, is put them in a position to where they've now forgotten that they just paid, money and bought a ticket to go through this attraction. They're now in it. They're actually in the hospital, and they're being attacked by zombies, or they're in the woods and there are werewolves, or whatever the storyline is. And that's really my job, is to get people to that point. And yeah, it's enjoyable. It really is fun. And the psychology of all this is really, it's really amazing. I didn't even realize I was into the shrink side of it before I was already doing this for a long. I've been doing it for a long time.
I like the, I think one of the saddest things I see at a theme park are usually young men who are like going, "Oh, this isn't going to scare me," and actually sort of objectively looking at the attraction and really trying to walk through, going, "That's just an actor, that's just an animatronic," and I'm going, "Look, you're absolutely missing the point. We're giving you permission and a sort of theatrical set to immerse yourself into, and the more you allow yourself to be more immersed, the greater your level of entertainment that you'll have." So I'm like going, no, you're kind of like fighting against something which is, it's not about coming out scared, coming out thrilled is actually the whole point. and it's not to resist it. So that's what I see people resisting and thinking, oh, I'm not going to be scared by that. I'm going, no, you've missed the point of sort of live theatre completely.
Yeah,
That's my target. I target a 21-year-old white male that's going through the haunted house because he's the hardest person to scare. He's going through with his friends, he's going through with a date, and he cannot afford to be seen screaming like a girl. So I target that. That's who that's my total focus is on that guy. How can I make him jump? How can I startle him? You have to do something he's not expecting. You can't just show him a bathtub full of mannequin parts with red paint on them. That's not going to scare him. You got to do something he's not expecting. And so that's where I get my fright factor is aiming at that hardest. And that's that background architectural too. It's kind of the concept. You always design for the worst case scenario, and that person, that male going through with a bunch of his buddies, repeating to himself over and over, nothing's going to scare me, nothing's going to scare me. That if I can get him to jump, then I've done my job.
Yeah, brilliant. I never thought about it this way. So my husband was a stage hypnotist for about 10 years. And we had a stage show traveling. We would travel to different events. And what I thought is really interesting when you talk about the psychology of that, because if you've ever been a part of a hypnosis show, it really is about immersing yourself into it, because we can't convince people to do anything that they don't want to do, right? At the end of the day, they are deciding to participate in that experience. Sometimes scary, sometimes funny. But, we kind of jump to the psychology of thrill. And Leonard, I know you mentioned, you were mentioning psychology just a moment ago, but how does understanding the psychology principles enhance the scare factor in your designs? Is that part of the influence?
When I first started designing haunted houses, I decided I needed to go find out what all the phobias were. I got to find out what the best phobias are so I can make sure that we hit those phobias. And I started looking at collecting different phobias from different locations before the internet. And, pretty soon I had 1,000 phobias. People are afraid of everything. They're afraid of the color purple. They're afraid of holes. They're afraid of smooth surfaces that don't have any holes. So people are afraid that there isn't anything that you put in a haunted house that somebody's not going to be afraid of. The major ones are bugs and the fear of falling and those kind of things, which are classic that you try to put into a haunted house. Everybody thinks that clowns are way up on the phobia list. They're below the color purple. I think there's more people afraid of the color purple as a phobia than there are clowns. But a lot of haunted house people just insist on putting clowns in their haunted houses, and I think that's more of the fact that you don't know who they are. It's the mask thing for a clown is why people think that they're scary. But yeah, and I didn't get anything out of that concept. I mean, other than bugs and dropping, making people feel like they're about to fall. But yeah, I use a lot of. I mean, when I went to architecture school, they taught me how to make a space feel comfortable, and I just break all those rules. You want a tall, narrow space is very uncomfortable. A low, wide space is uncomfortable. So I just take all those architectural, those feng shui rules and break them all just to make people feel uncomfortable.
Well, you just blew my mind with the color purple, because that's my favorite color. So now I know I'm going around scaring people all year long. That's fascinating information. Brendan, in your experience, how can fear be leveraged to create a thrilling experience that resonates with a broad audience? I know I know that Leonard just mentioned, creating small uncomfortable spaces or putting people in uncomfortable positions, and really understanding all of those phobias is certainly, I know, a part of that.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, I there's so the way I think about generating thrill as a designer is, well, Hitchcock did it clearly very well, that relationship between fear and thrill. It was, scare somebody or make somebody fearful or apprehensive, and then there's this very quick release of that. And sometimes it isn't just the release from that, but it is also to something that might be funny or humorous. So it will be, sound inside a cupboard, creeping up to the cupboard, opening the cupboard, a cat jumps out, everybody laughs, and then at that point you turn around and then you're stabbed. And that was kind of like, this is like you start low, you go high, then you come low again. And it's all those movements which are can be quite uncomfortable. But thinking about, as you say, the audience, and I used to think that trying to create popular entertainment, which you're saying is will appeal to most people, was almost like a low art form. But actually, I think it's one of the highest, because trying to understand, the 95th percentile people are going to appreciate what you've created, is quite hard. And also not to look, as you were saying, Leonard, like going, everybody's doing clowns for various reasons. So basically everything becomes a bit samey. But yeah, dragging people low, okay, to make something which is fearful or apprehensive. I love the 1,000 phobias list you have, Leonard. But then what will create that relief as well? So you have to make something which is joyful or humorous, and I think the best moment in all of the theme park ride design is Pirates of the Caribbean, and you're on the boat at the start, and then you're in the dark, you go over the fall, and then suddenly there's yo ho 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 Pirate's Life for me. And that never fails to fill me with such a sense of euphoria. I know it's going to happen, and I know it's not the biggest scare, but I think that relationship between the two is perfectly illustrated there. And that's, yeah, again, I'm actually feeling quite tingly now thinking about the first time I tried that. So yeah, so it's that combination of the two. But you have to understand both and appreciate, you're saying, what are the 1,000 things which people are going to find humorous and funny and joyful as well. And then I think you've got the perfect marrying of the 2 points you need to get between to create that sensation of thrill.
Terror and humor are very closely related. I wrote a seminar one time on the psychology of fear, and I went on the internet and did searches of people getting scared, so I could use those photographs in the presentation. And almost every photograph that I found when I did that search, there was one person screaming their lungs out and another person right beside them laughing their ass off. So the juxtaposition of, you're screaming and I'm laughing at you screaming, or you're screaming and I'm laughing at you screaming, is it's a very tangled emotion, and I think the two are very close.
I agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that's a great example of Pirates of the Caribbean. I used to close my eyes because when I grew up, Disney was my park growing up, going to every year several times because it was close. My mom was a tour guide for exchange students, so we went often because every time there was a new tour, we would get her boss would let her bring us with her. But I never went through that part without my eyes closed till I was pretty much. I mean, I was probably a teenager by the time I finally did it, but I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I loved that ride. It's one of my most favorites, and this is kind of a question for both of you with regards to like emotional engagement and how that plays a role in the attraction design. I know you've both touched on that a little bit, but is there a way that can be measured?
I jump in. There was so I've done a lot of physiological monitoring, or this area called sort of psychophysiological monitoring heart rate and pupil dilation and skin sweat, and we recently, I think in around 2017 at Thrill Laboratory, started looking at brain data, and yeah, there is a level of engagement that can be determined seemingly from brain data. I mean, they say they can do it in real time. And in fact, we've got devices which were spitting out levels of engagement. And I did some work with Real D, who are doing sort of some 5D cinema experiences with View Cinema. And they were asking us to look at the relative levels of engagement of people watching Monsters, Inc. in 2D and in 3D. And yet there was an uptick, but still I'm not entirely sure, what their algorithm was. And, it said it was engagement, but, I think anecdotally I go, yeah, of course, watching a 3D film of Monsters, Inc. is going to be far more engaging. But I think the value of it is level of engagement, great for emotional return greater value, and probably greater ticket prices if that's the link. But yeah, maybe that's the golden metric, if you can really measure engagement and actually use that as a measure of whether the creative act of making the things being is good, and then also how the audience are responding. And again, I'm going to throw AI in there again, because I'll be wanting to ask AI to make those judgments for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that you said, that it because one of the things Leonard and I talked about on the show when he was a guest on the show was the business part of it, right? And you're right. In order to continue to create these thrilling adventures for people, you first have to be able to make sure that the business is profitable, that you can continue to do that, and what you're doing is successful. And I think that for the businesses watching, which is most of our audience, that is I think a fair way of valuing whether or not the experience is well done. Leonard, I don't know if you want to add to that. I mean, you had so many great things to say about that part last time that I thought is super valuable to anybody who's creating this as a business.
It is, and it's interesting because the haunted house industry, at least in the United States, is having a very down year this year. It's possible. Some people think it's the economy, some people think it's the election, but it's actually the numbers are down this year, and that's an interesting fact, because we really the haunted house industry from really for the 40-50 years that I've been dealing with it has had almost like a 10% increase every year of attendance. The one thing that really gutted us was 9/11, when the towers went down in New York, because that happened in September. And there were haunted houses that were really good at marketing, and they had good years, but the majority of the industry took a huge hit. There were people that were 50, 60% of what they would normally do attendance wise. And it took us several years to get back up to where we were, but we went blowing right by that and continued, and those numbers continued to grow. So this will be the first year in a while. I mean, storms, weather is always, so sometimes there's an area, a part of the country that has bad, like a lot of rain, or there's heavy snow or something. Those, so there's areas that are down. If for some reason, if your baseball team, if your city's baseball team is in the World Series, your numbers are down. So there's competition, but typically, across the board, it almost, it kind of averages a 10% increase in attendance every year. And this year that's not going to be the case. We're still looking, and the numbers are still out, but it looks like the attendance numbers, at least in the U.S., are going to be down, which really hasn't happened since 9/11. So there's something at play, and I'm not sure what it is. There's also a lot of haunted houses. I mean, they're popping up everywhere. So we're spreading out our attention span, because there's so many different attractions all over the country that are just popping up, at farms, and people are still doing major, large home displays as well. But I'm getting lots of calls every year for people that are trying to open haunted houses, and that's great. I mean, the more haunted houses in a market, the stronger the market, and the more people that are going to haunted houses, and you can grow the size of the pie. It's not somebody coming in and stealing your attendance. The more haunts in a market, the stronger the market is. The Chicago market, we thought Detroit was huge with about 60 haunted houses. The Chicago market, last time I counted, had 80 in it. So wow. There's a lot of room, and there's some cities around the country. Albuquerque, I don't think it has a single one. So there's a lot of cities around the country that don't have any, and then there's some that just are they're on every corner. And to do well, you've got to stand out. So you've got to be able to scare people. You've got to get the word out. It's all about marketing. It doesn't matter how cool your haunted house is. If nobody knows about it, they're not coming. So you got to get the word out, and you got to give them a good show when they get there.
Mm.
Well, I agree on one thing, that I'm not going to get into politics, but the election is scary enough for people, I'm sure. I think that can be definitely a distraction. But I will say that
it's a huge amount of money out of the marketing dollars. There's so much marketing dollars that's spent, on radio and TV and during an election year, especially a presidential election year. that it makes it hard for the average haunted house to be able to buy the airtime that it needs. And sometimes they get bumped. Sometimes they buy air, and the one of the candidates will come in and say, no, I'll give you whatever amount you want, but it'll actually bump, other advertisers out of some time slots that are important. So, and it's, the timing is horrible. We need to move the election off until January or something so that we can, so it doesn't affect the haunted house industry, because every 2 years this becomes a problem.
I agree. I mean, if we're just talking the business, right? On the business side, marketing these attractions, they're having to compete with a lot of noise this time of year and with the elections happening. And that's something that I even in when we are working with our attractions on how to market, one of the things we say is promote, 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 because you are competing with all of that, right? And so I think that's fair to say that that's probably a lot of what's happening is just, the competition of getting the attention of those guests or what do they call people who visit haunted attractions frequently? Is there a name for that?
I don't think so. I'd call them patrons or guests or attendees.
Patrons or guests? Yeah.
Guests.
Hey, man, that might be something we got to develop here.
Yeah, I can't think of something off I was going to say weird, but that's disingenuous.
Well, I do have, I know we have a lot of questions for you guys, and I know we need to wrap up, but I do have one last thing that I want to ask, just because I know some of the viewers might be thinking this, and that is, what would be some advice that you have for aspiring creators of haunted attractions, or really any attraction that's looking to create that thrilling experience? Just from where you both sit today, what would be maybe an actionable step that they could take, or something that they might be able to use today with the advice that you give them?
I'll do it. Oh, sorry, Leonard, you go first, Leonard.
Don't do it. There's a lot easier ways to make a living than to open a haunted house. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hours. But if you're going to do it, make sure you do it right. Find somebody that's done it before to help you out. Location, funding are usually the two hardest pieces to put together. There's a lot to be said for starting small. I mean, a lot of people that start decorating their house, are turning a little walkthrough in the front yard, and then pretty soon they're taking over the garage, and then they're taking over the backyard and the front yard. And the spouse, sometimes it's the man, sometimes it's the wife, depending on who the Halloween fanatic is. But they say, well, this isn't, or the city comes in and says, you're not doing this in this property anymore. And then they're forced to either quit cold turkey or go professional. So, and that's where, starting small really does, get you through a lot of the headaches and stuff. Some people that just start big right off the bat fail because they, spend too much money on the quality of the show, not enough in the advertising, or they, sometimes they'll not understand building code and go into a building. I've had people call me, we built this entire haunted house, and now the city won't let us open it because it doesn't have a sprinkler system, which is required by code. So you have to know what you're doing. There's conventions, and there's a lot of information. My website has a huge amount of free information on how to get started and what, my vision of what a successful event looks like. So you just have to do your research and, do a real business plan. And when you get to the bottom of the business plan, if it doesn't say you're going to make obscene profits, then go back and rework something in the business plan, do more marketing, add stuff so that you can increase your ticket price to make sure that you're going to be profitable, because, usually those pie in the sky, numbers don't really pan out, at least year one. And a haunted house is a business just like any other. It's a 3 to 5 year payout. It's not a get rich quick scheme at all.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun, but it's not really a get rich quick scheme.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I just went to Anderson Farms here in Colorado, which they really have a great, haunted attraction, but also the pumpkin patch and the cornfields, all of that. I mean, it's a full festival during our Halloween season. And what I was reading their story, and I mean, this has been almost 40 years in the making. They started with a little tiny pumpkin patch, and each year just grew little by little. And to get to where they are today, I mean, the amount of grit and dedication that had to have taken to have what they now have 40 years later. I mean, because this place was packed. I couldn't believe it, but reading their story, I realized that this was not something that popped up overnight. This was not an overnight success at all, to any degree. But I don't know how many people are thinking about that when they see that, because a lot of times people only see the success. They don't see all the hard work and the tears and the blood and all of the things that go into the blood, sweat, and tears that went into the years and years that it took to get where they are today, or even just anyone who's successful. But Brendan, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add to aspiring creators.
Yeah, I think more generally about anybody who you say an aspiring innovator, creator. I think in the attraction industry where where there's a lot of novelty supposedly, but there's actually an awful lot of sort of conservatism and as far as investment goes. And I think nobody likes a risky investment. I think what you're saying, Leonard, it's kind of like the bottom line's got to has got to speak. So I think, and particularly as a creative who uses a lot of technology, looking for difference, but also something which is novel in the industry, you've got to look in other sectors. So whether you're looking in telecommunications, looking for technology that's been proven there to do with, I don't know, how audiences might create souvenirs, or looking in the elevator industry at technology that's proven but has yet to be exploited in the entertainment industry. So for me, it's thinking laterally. Don't just think, I want to make roller coasters, or I just want to make scare attractions, and going, I'm going to do clowns, I'm going to do this. You're saying, like Leonard was saying, it's like thinking laterally, but I think also laterally outside your sector, looking at sectors that aren't actually immediately associated, and just thinking, how can I make connections? Because at the end of the day, it's all these industries are about people. They're all about, we all have shared psychology, and it's just going, well, actually, let's just reappropriate that and bring it into the entertainment sector. 9 out of 10 times it might not float, but I think like that 10% of the times that you bring something into the sector that's new but has got a proven track record, it could transform the business. So that's where I tend to look, and that's where I'd say anybody wanting to get in and want to make themselves look attractive and different, have interests in other sectors as well.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've got some questions from the audience, if you are both open to taking a few of those questions. Maria, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yes, I did. So I know we're kind of bumping against time. It's already a little over an hour, so I will try and ask one question for Leonard and one for Brendan. The first one is for Leonard, and the question is, with the increasing use of interactive elements in haunted attractions, do you think there's a risk of losing traditional scare tactics, or is there a balance that enhances the overall experience?
When we first started doing when I first started doing haunted houses, we had just graduated from spaghetti for brains and peeled gravy for eyeballs, and and everything seems to be cyclical. For a while there, everything was about blood, and then everything was, no, we don't want any blood, and no, we got to have a lot of blood. So everything kind of comes in cycles, and what I see is, recently there's been a push for haunted houses where the actors actually physically touch the patrons going through. And when I first started doing haunted houses, that was very common, and we pushed away as an industry. We pushed away far away from that, and then now some of the newer, younger designers are kind of toying with those things. So everything seems to be cyclical. I don't think there's anything that happens that we haven't tried before, or that we won't do again. So everything kind of comes and goes. So so I don't think there's going to be anything that I don't think you're going to lose the old scares. The chainsaw does not seem to be as effective as it was 20 years ago, but it still scares people, and people still run, and that's what's important.
That's true. We have another question for Brendan, and The question is, in your experience, how can fear be leveraged to create thrilling experiences that resonate with a broad audience?
Oh, I think we partially covered off that question earlier, but I think it's I mean, fear. I think from what Leonard was saying, I think it's all about understanding people's phobias, and I think there are some elements which I don't know. I'm struggling here because I tend to think about firstly how you're going to thrill somebody and give them that excitement. So in a sense, I usually okay, this is a better way to think about it. As a designer, I usually think about emotions having two elements: arousal, which is all about getting adrenaline pumping in a body, but also the pleasure aspect, whether you like something or not. Now, if you can think about changing both of those, both taking somebody from a calm place to something where they're completely activated, and then also taking something which gives them a sort of element of displeasure and an element of pleasure, and think about actually trying to increase that. It's a little bit like voltage and current in physics. You know, the power of an emotional experience relies on both that arousal and that element of pleasure. And if you think about it in those terms, and every time you're thinking about doing either a scare tactic or something that's going to thrill somebody, think about those quantities and whether you're actually creating that movement from low to high. And, you know, you will literally have an electrifying experience.
Okay, good to know.
I think that's
So, yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say if you'd like me to ask more questions, or should we leave it to
Well,
that?
you know, I have a question because I know we've got to wrap up on time here, and I just have to say too, it's funny that Leonard brought up the chainsaw because my gym did a trip to a haunted attraction this year, and the lady who organized it said, "I hope the chainsaw's there because I had heartburn for 3 days. I knew that it scared me," and I'm like, I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? She's like, it's awesome. So it is so amazing to me what people see and feel in these experiences. And she shared that with me. She was like, and then the next day, I snuck out. I didn't go to the haunted attraction part. I just went to the dinner. The next day I saw her and she said, they didn't scare me as much with the chainsaw. So it's funny that you brought up the chainsaw because that was like, that's her thing that she wants to see when she goes. And I thought that was a really funny story that she mentioned. She said, I had heartburn for 3 days. That's how I knew it was a good haunted attraction. And she said that's how she measured it, right?
And it's got to be a petrol powered chainsaw. Now that we're going to get lithium ion batteries powering chainsaws, they're going to be silent. They're going to be no fumes. I mean, where's the horror in all that?
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be chased with a chainsaw. Well, I think just for the sake of time, we do have to wrap up today. I know that there's a lot of questions that did get answered, and I am sorry because this is just such great information. But it also tells me that maybe we've got to do this again at some point. And before we go, I would just like to make sure that our audience knows the best way to get a hold of you. Brendan, would you mind just sharing real quick what's the best way if somebody's got questions or wants to engage with you or collaborate, because it sounds like collaboration is important?
You can just reach out to me directly at engineer@thrilllaboratory.com. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. Leonard?
All you gotta do is Google my name. I show up like a rash.
Well, and I know it's entrepreneurs.com, right?
Yeah, if you can spell it, yeah, entrepreneurs.com. But yeah, just look me up on Facebook or yeah, just Google me. I'm there.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate the two of you spending this for me, I don't know. I know we're all in different places. For me, this early or late morning with me on Halloween and sharing this great information that I know is going to just help us continue to move these industries forward. And, you know, I am sad to hear that we're not having as big of a haunted year, but I think this is the type of things that this conversation is going to give people out there the types of things that they need to ensure that we continue to have success in many, many years to come. So thank you both for being here and for sharing your thoughts and being so generous with your time. I do appreciate it.
Pleasure. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Been
Yeah.
a great pleasure.
Happy Halloween.
Happy
Halloween.
Wow, that was
Well,
scary.
thank you both for your time. I appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you, Leonard.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.